Hi, it's Dr. Khan with chapter 4.4 to 4.6, which deals with the three different types of plate interactions or lithospheric plate boundaries. The learning objectives break up these three types of boundaries into their own objectives. Section 4.4 deals with divergent plate boundaries. Divergent meaning moving apart, and the concept of seafloor spreading. Divergent plate boundary means those two lithospheric plates are moving apart from each other, but this can occur in the ocean, in which case mantle material rises up in place of the spreading seafloor and creates new ocean crust. Or this can happen on a continental land mass where we actually have what's called continental rifting, or ripping apart the continent at a spreading center. It's important that you take a look at the video about this continental rifting process. Smart Figure 4.13, you can click on that either in the downloaded PowerPoint or right from the module page for this presentation. Convergent plate boundaries and subduction are a little more involved. There are three different types of interactions that we can get when two plates are coming together, and that really depends on what types of plates are coming together. So we have continents that can come together. We have an ocean that can come together with another ocean plate, or continent coming together with an ocean plate. Convergent plate boundaries are also known as destructive margins. Either we're pulling in one plate back into the mantle and it's melting, so we're destroying the plate by pulling it into the mantle and melting it, or we're destroying crust by kind of pushing it against each other and creating a mountain. The first type of convergence we'll talk about is ocean-continent convergence. This is when an ocean crust is actually pulled underneath the continental crust. One main idea here that we'll see with the idea of subduction is that the plate that gets subducted or pulled under the other plate is the plate that's more dense. So ocean floor is more dense than continental crust, and therefore the ocean crust is what gets subducted or pulled underneath the continental crust. There are some consequences for the surface of the Earth when a plate is subducted. First of all, we get a deep ocean trench out in the ocean. Secondly, as this lithosphere is being pulled under, it also pulls with it water, and this water actually lowers the melting temperature of the crust. So we actually get a melting of the crust that results in volcanic activity at the surface, inward from where the ocean floor begins to subduct. So because it's subducting underneath the continents, we get a chain of volcanic, essentially an arc of volcanic mountains here. And one example of that is the Cascades. So we have Mount Rainier, Mount St. Helens. These are Mount Hood. These are volcanoes that are on the west coast because the Pacific, in the Pacific Ocean, we have the Juan de Fuca plate. It's a relatively small size plate that's being subducted underneath the North American continent. Another example of that would be found in South America. Along the west coast of South America, we have a plate that's subducting underneath the continent and in turn forms the Andes Mountains, which are also volcanic. The second type is ocean-ocean convergence. We have two ocean plates that come together, and anytime an ocean plate's involved, we are going to get subduction. So the more dense plate will subduct underneath the less dense plate. We still get volcanic activity because we still have subduction dragging the plate underneath with water, lowering the melting point of the rock, and we form magma near the crust that erupts as volcanoes. So instead of an arc on a continent, we end up getting these volcanic arc islands. They build and build their mass with the volcanic material that's ejected from the volcano until some of them will break through the surface and actually create land. One great example of that is the Aleutian Islands. This is kind of the arm that extends off of Alaska, and those volcanoes are very active. And the continental-continental convergence. This is when we have two continental landmasses that are coming together. And the best example of that is India, which after the breakup of Pangaea moved relatively quickly towards Eurasia and closed the gap of this ocean that used to exist between the two of them. Once that gap was closed, we had land pushing up against land. And land continental crust is not dense at all. In fact, we can't force one to subduct under another. So instead of subduction here, we get mountain building. And these mountains, because we're not involving subduction or melting of crust, we actually push that material up against each other. It forms mountains that are not volcanic. Again, this is an important illustration that you can learn more about by accessing the SMART figure 4.18 on the collision of India and Eurasia. And finally, 4.6 covers transform plate boundaries. This is neither constructive or destructive. So these plates are just rubbing up against each other, creating earthquakes, but no new crust is formed or destroyed. And another video visualizing some important transform plate boundaries that exist along the Mid-Atlantic Ridge. The Mid-Atlantic Ridge is a divergent plate boundary, but all along this divergence here, we also have transform faults that bisect that.